Hi, this is Raj from MR Sportscars. In this video I'm going to talk about some of the common parts mechanically that fail on these 997 Gen 2 911s. So I've got a couple of the parts laid out here just to make it very clear exactly what I'm talking about, because I've kept some of the old parts along the way. So one of the things that does fail quite frequently on these cars is these little stabilizers. So these stabilizers hold up the front and rear sections. So there's one there. They're obviously different size ones. That's a front one, front bonnet. So these lose their pressure over time, and it will mean that when you go to lift it up, either the wind will take it, or at some point it will just shut itself, potentially on your head. They are quite expensive from Porsche, but the company that make them, Stabilis, they're available on third-party websites or through specialists. You can order those for not very much money, and you can actually switch them out yourself. It's a little bit fiddly, but that's something that you can replace quite easily, and it means that your boot stays open when you open it. The next part is very common, which is front coffin arms. So you can tell by the shape of them, or front fork arms, whatever you want to call them. They tend to, the rubbers in them, it's actually the rubber that wears rather than the arm itself coming to the end of its life. It's the rubbers that's inserted in it. Now, on other cars, you can potentially take those out, put new bushings in, and the arm is perfectly good. But for not much more money, you can get the whole arm directly through the manufacturers. Just literally swap like for like, and it's the same with the bushing in there that can wear as well. So those are very common, and when you hear a car that has got worn front coffin arms or rear lower arms that are gone, you'll hear, even just driving with cat's eyes, you'll hear like a thunk, sort of like a slight rattle almost. You'll know when you hear one of those that's gone. They're very, very common. It's nothing to be alarmed about. They just need switching out for new ones. And of the same issue really is the front top mount. So that's the top mount that sits in the top of the strut in the front. The suspension goes through that, and basically the bushing wears out, so it causes metal on metal, and again you hear knocking as you go over bumps, uneven surfaces. You'll hear that sort of metal on metal sort of like tapping. So these need replacing purely because the rubber has lost its sort of rubberness and isn't sort of like damping that effect. Another common thing is these top rubber housings that sit right up in there. These normally split, so it reveals part of the damper, the shaft of it, so it means that this is supposed to basically stop it from getting too much corrosion, too much exposure to the elements, and also it does provide like it's a bump stop. So it's worth getting those replaced when you're doing the top mounts as well. So do all of those at the same time. Then the other part, which is actually attached to the engine, it's called the tandem pump. So it's a part of the oil system. And actually, it's not normally the actual mechanism itself that fails. It is the casing. So the casing of these goes very, very porous. You can see it's all rusty now. It's very common to see these as an advisory on cars. You just basically, some specialists paint it or put like a waxy substance over the top, but really it needs a new one at some point, and that's a very common part, and you can see it under the car. I'm not going to show you, but it's under the car, just at the back of the engine there. So that is another common part. Then, in terms of more sort of bits that I haven't got. On the side here, let me just grab a torch. You've got also in here, you've got coolant pipes. Hopefully you can see them at the end of the torch there. 2 coolant pipes. Where they join up and go around the front of the car, there's 2 unions there, one on top of another of those two big rubber black pipes. Those tend to sort of fail over time, and that causes coolant weeping through those seals, and that will mean that the pipework either going into it or going across the front will need changing. And it's the same on both sides, so there's well worth inspecting those and getting those done if they're showing issues on them. If you see any kind of like crusting pink or white, that means that there's coolant sort of slowly leaking out of them. The other thing to do is to check the dampers, check that those top stops there, bump stops are there, the springs are in good condition, because and the top mounts obviously look okay, and there's no oil, sort of like misting of oil in any area there to show that the dampers are starting to leak. Discs and pads are another one which most people are aware of. Check that there's no sort of massive lip, that the outer wear marks, which are those little dimples that aren't actually drilled holes, if they've completely disappeared from the outer edge, then you know that the metal material of the disc has run out. Check these. I mean, these are obviously the seams on the back boxes obviously get hit and pummeled by the back wheels. They are quite common that they fail, just like all the gaskets and bolts that hold the exhaust system. So that's another common part, and actually on these Gen 2 cars you kind of have to take all that stuff off to access the spark plugs. Heat shields as well, so the exhaust heat shields, which are down there, they do fail. They're prone to failure, as are, if you've got a sports exhaust, the valves. So the switchover valves, where they are behind the rear wheels at the back of the engine at the right at the bottom, they do tend to fail as well. So you can get them either replaced, or worst cases you actually have to get new back boxes because it's the internal mechanism which has failed. So just be aware of that as being an issue of something that might fail. Air conditioning condensers, because of where they are, they're prone to being pummeled by stones. So that's an area that is regularly replaced, these condensers here. Not so much the radiators behind, but just the air conditioning condensers. They sort of have a shelf life, a useful life of 4 to 5 years. And then some more subtle parts, the window regulators. So the regulator that controls the up and down of these windows, that can fail, which would mean it just needs replacing. So the door needs to be taken apart, the regulator replaced and put back together again, and the window adjusted nicely so that it sits with a uniform sort of gap with the rear window. Otherwise you'll get wind noise through this area here. And then off the top of my head, is there anything else that's quite common that we do a lot of? I think that's about it. In terms of like sort of maintenance, so lower arms, anti-roll bar drop links as well at the front. We also do a lot of CV boots at the front, particularly because they take the most abuse. And I'd say that's about it. So there's not a huge list of regularly parts that need refreshing, I'd say, but there is a list that could add up to thousands if you have to do all of them in one go, if a car hasn't been maintained consistently and regularly throughout its life. So that's some of the tips I've got. If you've got any questions, please do leave them below, and please do like this video, subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching.